All right, so everybody wants to know, is X going to be the place to be online, right? We're diving into this analysis from digital futurist Joseph Rosinski, Joe Raz on X, and he lays out these 5 key areas, and honestly, some of the stuff is wild. But let's start with payments, because this one sounds like a game changer.
Oh, absolutely. What Joe Raz is suggesting here, it's fascinating, is that X could become this full-blown financial system, potentially even built around cryptocurrency.
Okay, so we're not just talking about buying an edit button with Dogecoin anymore. This is like actual transactions, paying for things.
Exactly. Yeah. Like he paints this picture where you could be paying for dinner, tipping creators for content you like, even purchasing services, all within X.
Wow. So instead of using Venmo to split that concert ticket, it's all happening on X. That's a huge shift. But is that something people actually want? I mean, isn't crypto still this kind of niche thing?
Well, that's the really interesting part. Joe Raz predicts this massive shift towards what he calls a creator economy on X, which basically means people getting paid directly for what they contribute. He seems to think that people will need to get familiar with cryptocurrency pretty quickly to keep up.
Huh. It's almost like, remember when we all had to figure out PayPal or we'd be stuck trading baseball cards for stuff online? So are you saying, like, if I'm an amazing meme maker, I'm suddenly raking in the, what, X coins?
We'll get to those native coins in a bit. They're a whole other beast. But yeah, you're getting the idea. Joe Raz sees this future where high-quality content equals earnings, maybe even someone's entire income.
Wow, that's kind of wild. Okay, so we've got content creation as a viable career path fueled by crypto. I'm starting to see why people are calling this a transformation. But what kind of content are we talking about here? What happens to the good old 280-character tweet?
Get ready for a whole lot more than 280 characters. Joe Raz suggests character limits. They might become a thing of the past. He talks about built-in multimedia, long-form writing. Imagine writing like your own personal odyssey right on X.
From tweets to epics. That's quite the leap. I can see some people rejoicing about finally being able to fit their whole rant into one post, but seriously, that completely changes what X even is, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It becomes less about those quick updates, witty comebacks, and more about building a presence through in-depth content. Joe Raz specifically mentions things like repurposing blog content for X, sharing personal stories, using visual elements strategically.
So bullet points, images, maybe even throw in some emojis for old time's sake.
Yeah. The name of the game here is going to be grabbing attention, keeping people engaged, which actually brings us to the next big shift, video.
Okay, video, sure. But isn't that already, like, everywhere online? What makes X's approach to video so different?
Well, Joe Raz specifically mentions the possibility of 10-hour video uploads. 10 hours. That's longer than most movies. He sees this as another huge opportunity for monetization, both for long-form creators and those who can make those short, compelling clips.
10-hour video, so I could have my morning coffee while I catch up on the latest steered of, like, Baking Championship, X Edition. I didn't eat a lot of coffee for that, but jokes aside, that's a bold move, right? It's almost like X is trying to become its own streaming platform.
Right. And while Joe Raz definitely emphasizes the potential of that long-form content, he also mentions even simple, well-made videos can be incredibly effective. It seems like for him, this is about experimenting, finding what works best for your content.
It's like he's saying everyone's making a movie now, even if it's just a 5-second clip of your cat wearing a hat. Which, speaking of things that sound like they belong in a sci-fi movie, let's talk about this whole native coins thing. It sounds cryptic, to say the least.
I'm with you there. This one's a bit of a head-scratcher, even for someone like Joe Raz who makes a living looking into the future. What he speculates is that X might be developing its own digital currency, kind of similar to Facebook's Libra project, which...
Lemma crashed and burned.
To put it mildly, yeah.
Yeah.
But the potential here is massive. Imagine earning X coins for your posts, using them to buy things on the platform, even converting them to other currencies.
So, like, X becomes its own self-contained economic ecosystem. That's either brilliant or totally bonkers, maybe both. But it sounds like even Joe Raz is saying this one's still up in the air.
Yeah, he acknowledges the regulatory and logistical hurdles. They're significant. Still, it's definitely something to keep an eye on, because if it does take off, it could be a real game changer.
Got it. Okay, so we've covered payments, epic-length posts, video extravaganzas, and a potential X currency. That's a lot to digest. It really seems like X is serious about this creator economy idea. But how does audio fit into all of this? Is there even room for podcasts in this brave new world?
Think spaces, but like bigger, bolder, and potentially way more lucrative.
Okay, so we're not just talking about your typical live audio chat anymore.
Right. Josaz imagines a future where people are actually compensated for participating in or hosting spaces, maybe through tips or even subscriptions. It'd be like building an entire audio-based business directly on X.
No, that is interesting. It's like those old school radio shows where people will call in and donate, but, modernized. You're saying people could make a living just from talking to people on X?
Joraz seems to think so, especially for those who can cultivate a loyal following and provide genuinely valuable content. He sees spaces becoming less about casual conversations and more like these curated audio experiences, almost like live podcasts, but with interactive elements.
Wow. So we've gone from 140 character text posts to 10-hour videos and potentially lucrative audio-only shows. Sounds like Elon Musk is really trying to build something entirely new here.
Absolutely, and that's what makes it so fascinating to analyze. We're potentially witnessing a paradigm shift in how we think about online interaction, content creation, everything. But the real question is, will it work?
And more importantly, what does it all mean for us, the users? We'll dive into those questions right after this.
Will it work? Yeah, that's the million-dollar question, right?
Oh.
But maybe even more important for our listeners is, will it be worth it for them?
Right, because let's face it, most of us aren't like, digital futurists or whatever. We're just trying to navigate this whole online world. So for the average person who's hearing all this and thinking, okay, that's cool, but what does it actually mean for me? What's the takeaway here?
Well, Joraz seemed to be saying that X is going all in on rewarding creators. Those who can make that high-quality, engaging content, whether it's written, video, audio, whatever, those are the people who stand to benefit the most.
So you're saying it's not enough to just be scrolling through my feed, liking the occasional cat video anymore. We have to actually, do stuff.
In a way, yeah. It's about being an active participant,
Mm-hmm.
not just a passive consumer. And the most exciting thing is, it doesn't really matter what you're passionate about. If you can find a way to share it in a compelling way on X, chances are you could find an audience, maybe even earn some money from it.
So that friend of mine who's obsessed with, I don't know, underwater basket weaving, they could become the next big X influencer.
Hey, stranger things have happened. Joraz specifically mentions the potential for niche communities to thrive in this new environment. The key is to provide value to your audience, whatever that looks like.
Okay, I see the potential, but let's talk practicality for a second. Let's say I'm that underwater basket weaving enthusiast and I'm ready to take my talents to X. How do I actually go about, making money from this?
Well, that's where those payment features we talked about come in. Imagine being able to directly tip a creator whose content you find valuable, like a few X coins for a particularly insightful thread. Or maybe you subscribe to a creator's profile to get exclusive content, behind-the-scenes stuff.
Like a Patreon, but built right into X.
Exactly. And with the potential for X to become this full-blown financial system, those transactions could be seamless, instantaneous, you name it.
Wow, so I could go from reading this hilarious thread about underwater basket weaving techniques to subscribing to that creator's, exclusive content, all without leaving the X app.
That's the vision. Of course, the details of how it will all play out still a bit fuzzy. But one thing's for sure, X is setting itself up to be a major player in what people are calling the creator economy.
The creator economy. It almost sounds like a buzzword, What does that even actually look like in practice?
Essentially, it's a shift away from the internet we have now, where a handful of massive corporations control most of the wealth and influence.
You're talking about your Googles, your Facebooks, all that.
Exactly. In a creator economy, it flips that power dynamic.
Yeah.
It's about individuals having more control over their work, their data, their earning potential.
So instead of just being users on a platform, we become more like entrepreneurs.
In a way, yeah, you have something valuable to offer, whether it's your knowledge, your creativity, your unique perspective, and you can leverage platforms like X to connect with an audience, build a business around it.
That's a really empowering way to think about it. But let's be real, not everyone's going to become an X millionaire, right?
Of course not. But I think what's important here is the shift in mindset. Recognizing that your time, your creativity, your online presence, it has value. And even if you don't become the next big influencer, you can still participate in this creator economy in ways that feel meaningful to you.
So it's not just about chasing fame and fortune. It's more about finding ways to share your passions, connect with others, maybe even earn a little something extra along the way.
Exactly. And that brings us back to what Gerwaz was saying about early adopters.
Ah, yes, the early adopters, the brave souls who are always down to jump into the unknown. But what does it even mean to be an early adopter in this context? Are we talking about like setting up camp outside X headquarters, waiting for the next update?
I think it's more about being open to change, willing to experiment, and maybe most importantly, willing to learn. This whole world of Web3, cryptocurrency, decentralized platforms, it can feel intimidating.
Intimidating is putting it lightly. I mean, I like to think I'm pretty tech savvy, but even I get lost in the jargon sometimes.
Right, but that's exactly why being an early adopter isn't about being some kind of tech genius. It's about having a curious mind, asking questions, and
Yeah.
not being afraid to dive in, try new things. Because, let's be honest, if Jerez's predictions are even half right,
The internet as we know it is about to change forever.
exactly. And who knows, maybe those who are willing to adapt and learn now will be the ones who really thrive in this new landscape.
Okay, so being an early adopter is less about knowing all the answers, more about just being open to the journey.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that we're all figuring this out as we go, and the best way to learn is by doing. So if you're excited about the potential of X, don't be afraid to experiment, try new things, and see where this wild ride takes you.
I love that, embracing the wild ride. But let's bring it back to the platform itself for a moment. We've talked about payments, content creation, even this whole X currency thing. But one thing we haven't touched on as much is this idea of a decentralized Web3 ecosystem.
Ah, yes, Web 3.
Mm-hmm.
That's where things get really interesting, but also, a bit more complex.
Which is why we're so glad you're here to break it down for us. So for those of us who might need a quick refresher,
Sure.
what is Web3 and what does it have to do with X? Okay, Web3. It's one of those things where I'm like, is it going to revolutionize the internet or is my head going to explode trying to understand it?
Yeah, it can be a little of both, right? But basically, when we talk about Web 3, we're talking about shifting away from this centralized internet we have now. A few giant companies, they control all the data, how we use it. Web 3 is about changing that.
So instead of like my data living on some Google server farm somewhere, it's more spread out, like a digital dandelion spreading its seeds.
I like that analogy. Yeah. Think blockchain technology. Information stored across a whole network of computers instead of one central location.
Yeah.
Distributing control, giving users more ownership over their data.
So less big tech, more like digital democracy.
Exactly. And this ties directly into what Joe Kraz is talking about with X. He seems to believe X could become a much more decentralized platform, maybe even embracing these Web3 aspects. Imagine a version of X where users have more say in how the platforms run, how content's moderated, even how data is used.
So it's not just Elon Musk calling all the shots anymore.
That's the idea, at least.
Right.
Of course, like how that actually works in practice, still up for debate. There are a lot of challenges, technical and logistical.
Right, because like with great decentralization comes great responsibility, right? Who decides what flies when no one's really in charge? Seems like things could get kind of chaotic.
You've hit on probably the biggest challenge facing Web3, finding that balance between individual freedom and, keeping some level of order. It's complicated. But I think Joanaz's point is that X seems open to exploring these ideas, which is a big deal in itself.
Okay, so if we zoom out for a sec, why does any of this even matter? I get that it's interesting to think about, but for our everyday lives, what's the practical impact? Why should we care about Web3 and this whole decentralized future?
I think that's the question, right? It boils down to this.
Yeah.
Do we want a world where a few powerful companies control our digital lives?
Yeah.
Or do we want more control over our data, our privacy, our online experiences?
So it's about like taking back some of that power, putting it back in the hands of the users.
Exactly. And that has implications way beyond just which social media platform we use. This is about shaping the future of the internet itself, making sure it's a force for good in the world.
Wow. That's a pretty powerful way to think about it. It's not just about like tweets and videos anymore. It's digital self-determination.
I love that. And I think that's what makes this whole conversation so exciting, even if it's a little overwhelming at times. We're on the edge of something big here.
Yeah.
It's up to all of us to decide what that looks like.
It really is. Okay, so we've gone from cryptocurrency to 10-hour videos to like the potential downfall of big tech all in one episode. It's a lot. So if you had to leave our listeners with just one thought, one takeaway from this whole deep dive, what would it be?
Don't be afraid to explore. Don't be afraid to experiment. And, most importantly, don't be afraid to ask questions, challenge the status quo. The future of the internet, it's being written right now, and you can be a part of it.
Love that. It's like that old saying, the best way to predict the future is to create it.
Exactly. So go out there, be bold, create something amazing.
Yes. On that note, We'll wrap up this deep dive. We covered a ton today, but remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation, right? Keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, keep creating. You never know what the future holds, especially in this wild world of tech.